Folks, only the realest of the real know what this one is. This right here,
Connecticut,
the UConn fight song, baby.
Symbol of might for the white and blue. So
Pat's pretty close.
In Connecticut, you.
Yeah. You know, Pat's pretty close there on the lyrics. They're mostly right. That is the UConn fight song, and it's the only way I would want to lead off a podcast that is happening on March 19th. As folks, I mean, obviously, this is March, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a bracket.
It spreads.
It spreads. We've got a bracket. I hope everybody is feverishly filling their brackets out, even though this is, obviously an NFL podcast. But March Madness is the best time of year. Hopefully all of you are partaking in some way or another. We do have our off the bench / bench mob / bench warmer brand bracket pool, which I guess I'll probably have to link again somewhere because I think I only posted it. If you go back on my Twitter at benchwarmerbrand, I think you'll find it. I posted on my Instagram story.
I'll pull it up and drop it in chat.
Yeah, throw it in there for anybody. It is free to enter. I am thinking about doing some sort of prize for the top 3 finishers because, if you finish top 3 out of, it's already up over 100 people in there.
That's the bench
that's pretty good. So we will. I'm thinking good start. Something NFL related. Maybe get you a jersey or something for the top 3 people in there. Get you a little NFL.com gift card of some sort, just to incentivize. Putting together a bracket that is actually good. And obviously all of those good brackets will have UConn winning it all because that's what they're going to do as they did last year. But Pat, I mean, we'll
let's
get
see
to
if that link works.
Yes, everybody click that link if you want to enter the bench mob bracket pool, bench warmer, bench mob, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Pat,
woke liberal bench mob, yep.
We've got a couple things to talk about off the top here, but before we get into anything football related, since we are talking about March, how do you feel about how the committee did this year, selecting the field of 68?
It sounds like hyperbole and recency bias, but I cannot recall a worse job a committee has done in a long time. I understand this is also the strongest bubble that I've seen, and I've probably been, 15 years that I've been following this. Every account. Mostly the seedings, which usually they, do a pretty decent job at. It feels like they did it a week ago and just didn't. Michigan State, a 9 seed? Michigan State shouldn't even be in the tournament. Michigan State is the Michigan State and Virginia were essentially legacy picks. Virginia is a travesty, a genuine travesty.
That program,
the 54th in net compared to Indiana State, who was 29th in net rating. Who wants to watch Virginia? I don't even know who they're playing. Colorado State, right? Colorado State, yeah.
Colorado State, yeah.
Who wants to watch Virginia score 35 points against Colorado State and lose when we could be seeing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
I don't know, Pat. The Virginia lack of scoring fest sounds like a great time to me. You could do a drinking game of just drink every time Virginia scores and probably not be drunk by the time the game ends.
There's honestly a good chance. It's just crazy, and to mention Colorado State, the disrespect for the Mountain West is insane.
A lot of Mountain West teams did get in at least, which unlike
they got
the Big
in.
East,
they got their teams in, but for Boise, neither Boise State nor Colorado State should be playing tonight or tomorrow night. No way. In New Mexico, being an 11 seed, they're favored against Clemson. They're favored. Yeah. Utah State, outright Mountain West winner. Regular season winner that gets 6 bids, and they're an 8 seed. And then the only team that they bid high is the only overseeded one of the bunch, San Diego State.
Yeah, it was weird. It seemed very narrative based. It's like San Diego State gets more props for making the Final Four last year, and then they put 3 out of 4 Final Four teams in the same region this year. You got UConn, FAU, San Diego State. If Miami made the tournament, they probably would have been in there too.
FAU is an 8 seed. Is outrageous. It is also outrageous. I was thinking that they might have been a surprise snub. They might have been the surprise. There were no real surprises, but it's just how it all shook out. And as you mentioned, the Big East, but 3 Big East teams.
Oh, dude.
They have 3 top seeds. They have a 1, 2, and 3 seed. and no one else. Granted, I personally only think it should have been St. John's. Seton Hall had a terrible non-conference schedule, and they got phased out by all these, all the bid stealers, and Providence just wasn't. St. John's is just
Yeah.
I would probably take out Virginia and honestly probably like Michigan State, which is wild. The fact that they're a 9 seed and they would probably be the second team I would axe, but just seems really lackadaisically put together. And it just becomes the point of when is there just going to be a metric? When is the field going to be set completely by a metric? Because the eye test does jack shit. The eye test does fuck all, especially these geezers who are university presidents that do not watch college basketball outside of the teams that their team plays. So the fact that we're still doing this in 2024 when there are so many great metrics, net rating, Ken Pom, Bart Torvik, there are so many great metrics judging college basketball teams, and we're doing this, and we are still doing this.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. And honestly, Pat, my biggest gripe with the entire thing was the East region. And I'm not coming at this from a bitter UConn fan sort of thing, because yes, our region is incredibly tough. I'm coming at this from a quality of the entire tournament perspective. When you look at the East region and you've got the conference champions from almost every major conference in the same region.
Except for NC State, who was the bad one.
Right. Like,
they got all
what
the,
are
Oregon,
what are we doing? What are we doing? Like, you've got UConn, Illinois, Iowa State, and I'm missing, and Auburn. Like,
yeah,
I don't. Those teams. Those are the teams that, like, before the bracket was revealed, I was like, those are teams I would love to have all 4 of those in my Final Four. Like, it would be a little bit of a chalky Final Four. I mean, you'd be looking at, well, obviously a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4 seed, or something, some variation of that if they got a different seed line in a different region. But for them to all be in the same one, it's not only a disservice to UConn, which, again, whatever, if we're going to be the best team and we're going to go back-to-back, we got to prove ourselves anyway, but it's a disservice to those teams to have to go through the defending champions who might be better this year and go through potentially other conference champions and some very good mid-major teams like Drake, BYU are in there as well. Like, it is as loaded of
BYU's not a mid-major anymore. Put some respect on them.
You're right. It is as loaded of a single region as I can ever remember, because I am looking at these other regions struggling to come up with Final Four teams. It's like, yes, Houston, great. You can pick them out of the, what region are they in? The South, and feel pretty good about it. After that, I don't care about North Carolina. I don't believe in Purdue because I have a memory longer than 5 minutes. Like, it's very weird to me. It was a very weird job by the committee. We'll get into some of my favorite picks toward the end of the pod after we get through our normal NFL agenda. But that is just kind of our initial thoughts on the bracket.
But just to kind of tease it, you talked about the UConn region being difficult. Like, it was the first one to get revealed, and my immediate thought was, oh, that's cake. I'm like, that's nothing. Really? But then after seeing the other regions, I was like, what the fuck? That's the hard. I think about the hardest region. But spoiler alert, you named those conference champions. I have one of them losing in the first round.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, we'll get to that. We've got some fun picks here at the end that we'll talk about. But, Pat, there has been, again, another major week of news in the NFL. So let me hit the sound effect because I'm a good producer.
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
Folks, it happened. Justin Fields has finally been traded, and it was for a 6th-round pick that could turn into a 4th-round pick. Oh, my goodness. Womp, womp with a
Do the Roonies
womp.
just, like, have stake in the Bears that we don't know about? Because this is the second time.
They do continually rob the Bears. Chase Claypool and now this. Look, I don't know what I think of. I do know what I think of Justin Fields as a prospect at this point. I think he's a guy that can be fine-tuned into being, a top half of the league quarterback. The Bears did not do their best job at, fostering that sort of potential. So I think it is possible that the Steelers bring that out of him, but I also don't think that Justin Fields is some sleeping giant potential MVP type of player that, quite frankly, I thought he could have been maybe, 2 years ago. I thought he had that sort of potential. At this point, we know a little bit of who he is. We may not know exactly who he is because he has not played with a clean pocket really ever in his career, but still you would expect to see maybe a few more flashes, at least with how he, throws the ball. We'll see how it plays out with, if and when he gets this opportunity in Pittsburgh, Pat, because for right now, the report is that Russell Wilson is going to be the starter here and that Fields is entering the fold as the backup. So how do you see this playing out? Do you think it's going to stay that way? Or, when do you think Justin Fields will get his chance, if at all?
I think by mid-season, you've got to think that he'll, barring a big, spike in Russell Wilson's performance, because we talked about it last week, how, his performance was, okay, especially compared to 2 years ago. His performance last year was okay, but, is that good enough for a Steelers team that somehow made the playoffs with the bumfucks at quarterback?
Yeah.
They've got a great defense, and they trade Deontay Johnson, but they still have some of the offensive weapons and offensive genius Arthur Smith in place. So there's no reason why they can't at least contend for the 7 seed. So if Russ is not cutting it, then I think it's going to be a quick hook. And honestly, Russ just playing okay may not be cutting it.
Yeah, I made a video, kind of playing on this aspect, but I do truly believe it. Justin Fields has such a dedicated group of fans, and I think his play style and maybe the ceiling that we have seen from him in certain games with the Bears over the past couple of years is going to endear Steeler fans to him as well, especially when, Russell Wilson is the guy who's entering the season as the starter, and we know just doesn't really have that sort of flashy upside anymore. Maybe Russell Wilson over the course of a season is the more stable quarterback option. I would say he probably is, but if you look at it just from a realistic perspective, the Steelers are going to feel that heat unless Russell Wilson really does tap into the fountain of youth, at least to some degree, where it's not a parade-worthy event when he throws for over 250 yards. Unless that becomes a regular thing, they are going to feel the heat of having Justin Fields as his backup. And it's going to be just like any other situation, Pat, where you have, essentially a rookie quarterback sitting behind an older veteran, and the veteran is just being mid. Obviously, Fields is not a rookie, but he is still, 8 years younger than Russ, if not 10 years younger, something like that. He's much younger than Russ, and he's got upside that many people believe is untapped. So I think they have to know they're getting themselves into that situation. I think with that in mind, they must be welcoming it to a degree. So to me, they can say all they want right now about, Russ is the starter and Fields is coming in as the backup. I believe that. I don't necessarily believe there's going to be, a camp battle for this unless Fields really shows out and Wilson stinks. I take them at their word.
I think it would have to be, I think it would have to be drastic in both directions for that to happen before the season.
Yeah, but I'm with you. I think it's going to be something that happens mid-season and, maybe after the first month, 6 weeks of the season where, especially if the Steelers are showing potential and, maybe only losing games by a couple of points because of poor quarterback play. Because we've talked about it a few times now, Pat. They're trying to construct their team kind of how the Browns did with just this great defense and then good enough quarterback play. Yeah. I will be interested to see what they do at receiver to surround and support these quarterbacks now that they have traded Deontay Johnson. It is a good draft to do it because they've got, obviously, we both like George Pickens to an extent. They've got Pat Freiermuth as the tight end, and they've got a couple of good running backs. But I still think when you've got two, iffy quarterbacks, I mean, we've seen Russell Wilson put up just kind of okay numbers with Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. We've seen Justin Fields put up really just okay passing numbers with DJ Moore at receiver. I think they got to get one more weapon here if they want to get the true most out of these two guys, whoever ends up playing more games for them this year.
And the other thing about the situation, there is no way that when they were talking to Russ, they did not tell him, hey, we are targeting Justin Fields. Yeah. We are bringing you in as a starter. There's no way that they did not even at least tell him that they were looking at it. They were, thinking about doing it. So I think any talk of a QB controversy, will there be? Yes, but right now, probably not. But I mean, I think Justin Fields immediately jumps to the best backup in the league, by a fair margin. I still think he probably should be starting. There are teams, the Raiders, depending on what the Vikings do, where he would be an upgrade. So it's a good problem for Pittsburgh to have. And I mean, I do think somehow this was Justin Fields' best opportunity to kind of rejuvenate his career, which is wild considering he's a backup.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Justin Fields basically indicated as much, because the reports are that Fields, the Bears were working with him to find the best destination possible, and that he turned down as many as 4 teams that the Bears were trying to trade him to before this. And that, to me, that says, Eagles probably, because that's a team that the fit makes sense in terms of a backup for, the play style with Jalen Hurts as your starter, but Fields looking at that is like, I have no shot to actually compete for that. At least, he probably looked at Russell Wilson and kind of is licking his chops a little bit as far as the team's interested in him. Like, okay, if there's any team where I can actually maybe get in the lineup at some point, maybe even sooner than later, it's going to be Pittsburgh and not, Philly. Another team that was rumored was Indy. Like, Justin Fields is not going to be named the starter over Anthony Richardson at any point. Like, it would be a matter
especially
of
considering they are relatively similar. They at least have similar play styles.
Exactly. And you obviously know the Colts are going to, continue to let Richardson develop and hopefully become something better than Fields. So, yeah, those are just the teams I'm speculating were interested in him. There were reportedly 4 teams that he did not end up wanting to go to. The Raiders, yeah, true. That one would be interesting if he turned down Vegas, because prior to the Gardner Minshew signing, you would think there was a pretty clear opportunity for him to compete there. But, look, I'm excited to see what is next for Justin Fields. I hope I'll be one of those sort of ravenous fans waiting for him to take the starting job in Pittsburgh, because I just don't care to see what Russell Wilson has to offer anymore at this stage in his career. Yeah, maybe he puts up another 26 touchdown, 10 interception season. Great, cool. I don't care. Show me the guy that can maybe be more than that. And I know, we're several years into this now, and if you haven't seen it by now, maybe we never will. Russell Wilson, I know, just doesn't really have it anymore. So give me Justin Fields sooner than later in Pittsburgh. It's going to be quite interesting to have both those guys in the same quarterback room. I can see Justin Fields just getting a migraine being around that dude already. Pat, we had another big trade here. This one draft related. So the Vikings have traded for the Texans' first-round pick. The Vikings are getting number 23 and number 232 overall. The Texans get number 42, number 188, and a 2025 second-rounder. And this is viewed largely as a play for the Vikings to gain assets to potentially move up even further in the first round and get themselves a quarterback, which, I mean, yeah, seems pretty obvious at this point. I feel like this is the right move for them. I don't know what quarterback they would expect to fall to them otherwise, if they're not planning to trade up even further. And I suspect, I don't know. I wonder if this is a J.J. McCarthy or if this is a Michael Penix move, because we expect the rest of them to be gone unless the Vikings are really trying to trade up to number 3 or 2.
Which I think is a possibility.
It is a possibility. Word on the street is that it's the Cardinals that the Vikings are looking at this tentative trade spot with. So that would be number 4. That would indicate likely 4 quarterbacks off the board to start the draft. And realistically, that's probably J.J. McCarthy. I wonder how Vikings fans would feel about that, because...
At 4, man.
The J.J. McCarthy thing just feels like trying to stretch this quarterback class a little further into something it's not. Yeah, maybe he can be something, but you want to find that out with the 15th pick or something around that. You don't want to have to spend all that capital on J.J. McCarthy and just for it to not pan out, because I think there is a very, very strong chance that he doesn't pan out. I feel like he's a tier below these other 3 guys. But we'll see. I feel like this is at least the right line of thinking for the Vikings. Would you agree?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, because at 23, or was that 23 was where they were? Yeah, right? Or no?
They got 23.
No.
Their pick is at 11.
11, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they might have been able to get McCarthy there, but I think it's pretty likely that a team like Denver would be trying to move up and snipe that pick, or someone else that we don't know about. But they clearly have a plan, because there were multiple options in free agency or trades with a guy like Justin Fields. They must have knew that, hey, we want one of these rookies in particular, and this is how we're going to get it. So it really seems like This is a calculated effort.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to need somebody to throw the ball to Justin Jefferson, or else Justin is going to bolt for, I don't know, literally anywhere else if he's got one of these bums throwing to him this year. They got to go get somebody, regardless of what I think of JJ. It's weird, Pat. It's a weird situation to be in because it is supply and demand, and if they think that JJ is going to go somewhere before their current first-round pick, then yeah, I guess you gotta make a play and move up for him. It feels to me like one of those moves that while it is the right one strategically because you have to fill that gap, it's going to be one where they are kind of overcompensating, or it's just a reflection of what teams do when they really are desperate for a quarterback. And it seems like it's going to be a move that we may look back on in a few years and be like, oh, that was really dumb. He was never that guy. Why did they do that? Well, It's because quarterback's the most valuable position in the sport, and you got to take those swings. And if the market dictates that's where you have to take the swing, then that's what it is. But it appears that could be what the Vikings are planning to do. I'm sure their fans, for the most part, are not thrilled about the JJ hypothetical, probably hoping that they can maybe move up for May or Daniels. But look, if I'm the Patriots or the Commanders, fuck off. We need quarterbacks too, so absolutely not. Pat, the Chargers were quite active this week, as we knew they would be, trying to free up some cap room here, and they did it in, to me, a little bit of an unexpected way. So they had 4 absolutely massive cap hits that were putting them in cap hell. Those being Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. They decided to keep the 2 defensive guys and get rid of both of the offensive guys. So they traded Keenan Allen for a 4th-round pick to the Chicago Bears. This struck me as a bit surprising.
Yeah.
Because there are, I think, a few teams that could have used Keenan Allen, and I don't think their fan base would be too upset if they traded a third for him. I wouldn't go any higher than a third for a guy who is age 31 or 32 for Keenan. And he's right at that
significant injury history outside of last year as well.
You've got the injuries, you've got the age cliff coming. But I look at this specifically from a Patriots point of view, Pat, where our receivers are Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jalen Reagor, KJ Osborne. I look at these guys. I saw somebody said to me on Twitter, we have 8 number 3 receivers. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It just feels like for a team like the Patriots we still have like $50 million in cap space. This is a guy that is not going to be taking up that cap space for that long. It would have been kind of the perfect receiver to acquire to help along, a rookie quarterback. And so I'm just a little surprised other teams weren't in it. With that said, the Bears obviously agree with that line of thinking because as they are now essentially 100% going to take Caleb Williams with Justin Fields out of the mix, they just got an incredible wide receiver too to play alongside DJ Moore with Caleb Williams. I mean, what a move for them.
They're setting him up for a lot of success. Plus Cole Kmet, who has been, a borderline top 10 tight end, very solid. The run game is hilarious, but you don't need to worry about that. But
DeAndre Swift, baby.
In credit to, did you see DeAndre Swift getting flamed on Twitter and the Bears getting flamed on Twitter?
I did not.
Today? Oh, because they posted like a hype video of being like, oh, his vision, and then someone's like, wow, how did he see this hole? And then they just circle a huge, or it's like, guess what happens here? Does he A, go to the sideline and score a touchdown, or B, run directly into the defender for no reason? Like the Bears and DeAndre Swift were getting absolutely cooked today on Twitter. It was kind of funny, but I respect to Keenan Allen because they obviously asked him to take a pay cut, and he said no, which is rare. But he did just have the best season of his career. Why should he, especially after a lot of the injuries he's had, for him to be as productive as he was? I don't, I feel like it was justified for the Chargers to ask, but I think it was very justifiable by him to stand his ground and say no, and then gets traded to what should be, God, that's so weird to call Chicago a possibly good situation, but DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are going to be a great foundation for Caleb Williams getting adjusted to the NFL.
I think you're looking at a situation in Chicago, too, that's probably going to be a lot more pass-heavy than Los Angeles is with the Chargers. With Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman in the fold, and now no receivers. I mean, obviously the Chargers are going to address this in the draft because they will not continue on with Quentin Johnston as their wide receiver one. That man could not be less qualified for that role right now. Look, I hope he takes at least a small step forward in year 2 as much as anybody. I don't like watching players fail, but he had about as bad of a rookie year. Yeah, he had as bad a rookie year as you can have. So I'm sure the Chargers are not heading into next year expecting him and Josh Palmer to be, 2-for-2 replacements for Keenan Allen and Mike Williams here. But yeah, as far as Caleb goes and the Bears, like, great move for them. Pat, from a fantasy perspective, I want to kind of take a look at all of these guys. Caleb's going to have some immediate fantasy value, I think. It's so tough to project rookie quarterbacks for fantasy, and inevitably he's not going to cost you much in the draft, which I think is going to be beneficial as well, because you kind of mitigate the downside a little bit. I can't imagine he's going to slide up past CJ Stroud, who's like quarterback 7 or 8 right now. I can't imagine he's going to slide up past even like Trevor Lawrence. Maybe they'll be sort of the same tier. But this is an offense that they are building for Caleb Williams. They're putting as many weapons as possible around the guy. He's got reasonable mobility. It is so tough to trust rookie quarterbacks. And obviously you're not going to trust him to the extent that he's the only quarterback you're going to draft in fantasy, but it is shaping up to be a situation that I think the upside definitely outweighs the downside.
You see, because I feel like in recent years, it's kind of been like, even these first-round rookie quarterbacks are kind of scary in fantasy unless they have rushing upside. Like last year, Anthony Richardson was the guy that was going as a QB1, not a pocket passer like CJ Stroud. Stroud completely just, broke that trend where he showed that a traditional pocket passer, not a pocket passer, you know what I mean? Traditional passer could be fantasy relevant that way. And sure, I think Caleb Williams could do that. And similar to Stroud, we didn't think we'd be saying that with the Texans. He is in a good offensive situation, as opposed to a guy like Bryce Young, who I think we all kind of knew that there was really no chance for success. And I feel like we may be like, for example, Drake May. If Drake May is in Washington or New England, we're probably going to sit there and say, I'm not touching him in fantasy because of not a great situation. Jaden Daniels, on the other hand, I feel like will at least be a fringe QB1 just based off his rushing ability. But I think Caleb is good enough and has a good enough situation where he will at least put himself in the conversation. And he'll get drafted regardless, but he may be getting drafted a little earlier than the late round flyer backup.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be late round flyer. I think you're looking at probably, if I had to guess, anywhere from the 8th to 10th round for some over-optimistic folks.
Yeah, I was thinking more the back end of that.
8th might be a little too early. Maybe in 12-teamers, 8th isn't too early. But, I think you're looking at maybe once the double-digit rounds are creeping around the corner, that's when you'll think about Caleb Williams in your draft. But, it's just, you don't often see a rookie quarterback stepping into a place where he's got maybe the best receiver duo in the league. Especially if the Bengals trade T. Higgins, we might be looking at the best receiver duo in the league. So that's crazy to think about, a rookie being able to step foot into that situation along with Cole Kmet, along with a good pass catching back like DeAndre Swift. It's a pretty ideal situation, maybe not from an offensive line point of view, which is going to be certainly the biggest talking point there. But in fantasy, sometimes you can overcome that, at least putting up those points. Pat, Mike Williams on the other side of this just got signed today with the Jets. 1-year deal worth up to $15 million. I'm not this doesn't move the needle for me with Mike, because we know what Mike Williams is at this point. If we assume health for all involved, even like Rodgers plays a full season, Mike Williams somehow, praise God, plays a full season, you're still going to have such volatility, I think, that it's going to be irritating to own him at the very least. But Mike Williams is still, it's at least an interesting ad here for the Jets. I'm not sure how I feel about how it affects the rest of their offense, but what was your initial take when you saw this deal come through?
1 second, I've got to make a pick in a fantasy baseball draft really quick, and then I'll talk about Mike Williams. I think, damn it, Brandon Nimmo got picked. He was in my queue. I got William Contreras here, but I feel like I can wait on a catcher. I hope nobody's listening.
I thought this draft didn't start yet.
Huh?
I thought your draft didn't start yet.
Oh, no, it started at 7:30. It coincided with this podcast. Could go starter. I could go really. I need an infielder. Oh man, my team stinks. We're oh god, oh
Is
goodness.
JJ Hardy available?
Good lord. Emmanuel Clase.
Okay, I know who that is at least.
But Mike Williams, I think what you said is true. I think the potential there is crazy. I think the ceiling for this Jets team is crazy. But again, we have not seen it from Mike Williams to be able to stay on the field. And even when he's on the field, he's been incredibly inconsistent. I think that could very much change under Aaron Rodgers. You know, you still, I think Garrett Wilson would be that more Devontae Adams security blanket guy, while Mike Williams will do what he does best and stretch the I almost said stretch the floor, was it basketball? Stretch the field and, you know, use his size to, you know, outreach against defenders. But we just need to see it. We just need to see it. I mean, could Mike Williams be the diamond in the rough fantasy pick? Absolutely. I think he's going to be a guy that we're talking about, unless he's getting overrated. Unless people are talking about him like, oh, Mike Williams is a potential flex, where it's like, no. Could he be? Absolutely. But based on what we've seen from him, I think you've just got to be a little hesitant with it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is the Garrett Wilson hype train is going to be wheels up once again this year. Like, I don't think
as it should be.
I don't think the lack of production or the poor situation that he ended up in this past year is going to hurt his draft value
at
all. People are gonna look at it as, look, as long as Rodgers is healthy, now you've got a guy who might actually distract the safeties a little bit as long as he's on the field, because I can't imagine they were going to account too much for Alan Lazard or Randall Cobb, Rodgers' little buddies, who I know Lazard, I think they're both gone. Either way, they're not going to play on this fucking team next year.
Bring back Mecole Hardman.
Yeah, you've got somebody, you know, to play alongside Garrett Wilson to take some attention away, especially for, you know, the underneath stuff and maybe some of the easier targets. That's a great sign for anyone that wants to invest in Garrett Wilson, and I think we could finally have the breakout for him that we want. So that's what this move really is for me. It's not about Mike. It's maybe a little about Rodgers. I think Rodgers could have a nice little fantasy year as a back-end QB1 with these weapons if Mike can stay healthy. But look, Mike staying healthy is a big if. So put it this way. Just enjoy the weeks that he is healthy for you future Garrett Wilson owners, because it will open some things up. Just understand that may only be the case for, you know, half of his games. And then, on the back end of this, Pat, we mentioned it, the Patriots signing KJ Osborne. Instead of Keenan Allen, we signed KJ Osborne. I don't know what to do with this team anymore. I just hope that we trade back into the first round in addition to our quarterback pick, and we can get a receiver.
But Gerard Mayo's not like other head coaches. I don't even remember who was the one that said that. I don't even remember.
Gerard Mayo was the one that said we're going to burn some cash, and we have in fact not burned the cash on anyone other than in-house free agents except Antonio Gibson and KJ Osborne.
It might have been Antonio Gibson who said that, I think, actually, because there was a quote within the last week where somebody said Gerard Mayo's not like other head coaches. It's like, yeah, he's not geriatric like that. And like maybe that's it, but. You know, if you're in the Patriots and you're used to literally the most miserable man on the face of the earth, to Gerard Mayo, like, you're gonna be. It's gonna be a bit of a shell shock for you.
That is fair. Pat, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and KJ Osborne being on the move were not the only big name wide receivers.
Like the clown in the army.
I know, very, very generous for KJ Osborne in that conversation. But another wide receiver was on the move, Calvin Ridley. Signed with the Tennessee Titans. This one was wild because, look, first of all, pat on the back for me, because when we did our ideal fits draft, I had Calvin Ridley to the Titans. Not necessarily because I thought it was going to happen. I thought it was a possibility, but I just really liked the fit. And now I have to really do some self-reflection on what I think of Calvin Ridley in fantasy this year, because I said I liked him. Now do I have to buy back in on this dude that burned me this past year just like Gabe Davis did in the past? That's neither here nor there for now. The way this move materialized was wild, because for 2 days, literally almost 3 days, all we heard was Jags or Patriots. That's all it was. Mm-hmm. And with the Jags, the only reason we thought that he hadn't signed yet was because they had to wait for Wednesday for free agency to actually start so that they wouldn't owe the Falcons as high of a draft pick. So it was like, okay, that's why he's lollygagging around, because, you know, he's probably got this deal done with Jacksonville and he's just waiting to make it official because they don't want to give the Falcons a second round pick. And then Wednesday comes, free agency opens. We hear nothing for like a couple hours, I think it was. And then he signs with the Titans. So the Titans for 4
Out of
years.
nowhere, dude.
I believe 4 years, $92 million for Calvin Ridley.
Insane overpay.
Contract. And yeah, I was going to say, Pat, like, look, for fantasy value in the immediate future, I kind of like Calvin Ridley. I think he could be decent. In terms of a real life football move, awful. Just awful. Like, I voiced my concerns about Calvin Ridley's sort of focus and just general consistency in the past and why I didn't necessarily want him on the Patriots. Looking at like the lack of money we spent, I kind of wish we signed him or somebody just to spend it and get weapons. But in general, Calvin Ridley was not my ideal signing for those reasons. And now the Titans are paying him a shit ton of money on a team
ninth highest paid receiver in the league. It's just mind-boggling. Mind-boggling.
What has he done to earn that? Like, I know in totality, he had a decent year last year.
And the thing is, even in Atlanta the year before all the stuff happened where he left the team and then the suspension, I remember him being extremely disappointing.
Yeah,
like he was going in the second round that year. I believe that was 2019, if I'm not mistaken. He was very underwhelming. So this guy is based on all potential and vibes. And how can the vibes be good when this man literally is a problem gambler, seemingly? He probably had the Titans plus $1 million for Calvin Ridley to sign with. But I really don't get it. And to see how inconsistent he was in Jacksonville last year, even though Trevor Lawrence was a bit inconsistent, but like I said, I was all Christian Kirk over Calvin Ridley, and I still am. I would much rather have Christian Kirk on my team right now than Calvin Ridley. Different receivers, of course, but fantasy, it could happen. I think it all depends on Will Levis and how well this team adapts to this Brian Callahan run offense. I think we're so used to just these boring Titans offenses under Arthur Smith and Tim Kelly, where it's just hand the ball to Derrick Henry, short pass to A.J. Brown, trade A.J. Brown. like this could potentially be one of, a fast-paced offense that looks to move the ball down the field quickly. And if that's the case, Calvin Ridley I'm also a big DeAndre Hopkins hater at this point. Like, I saw a thing where, like, which wide receiver duo would you have? And, like, it had Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins. It had Hopkins and Ridley in the graphic, and I'm just like, yeah. It's like, is it literally 2019 right now? Like, is it 2019? But, I mean, it was also just bonkers in terms of, like you said, how it happened, how it seemed like it was either, Jacksonville or New England. I remember getting the notification just being like, oh, like one of those, like, but, yeah, I don't. I don't know. I just think the overpay is just wild. Is wild. We saw him get a bigger contract this offseason than fucking Mike Evans, who's a Hall of Famer. Yeah, crazy.
And the Mike Evans thing is one of those where it's like, yeah, I know he's a little older than Calvin Ridley, but I don't care. I will pay Mike Evans more than Calvin Ridley.
Oh my God, give me Mike Evans.
Time. Like, look, Calvin Ridley may very well have some untapped potential as well. I keep using that term, but I do think the Titans and Brian Callahan, formerly of the Bengals, will do a better job at moving Calvin Ridley around and using him a little more creatively than Jacksonville did. So I think there might be, some extra production here than what we've seen in the last couple of years out of Calvin. But yeah, that's way too much money. I think it's an anti-competitive move from the Titans in terms of like long-term outlook. Yes, it'll probably make them a little better in the immediate future. Gives Will Levis somebody else to throw to, puts another receiver alongside DeAndre Hopkins, but it just doesn't feel like teams that overpay receivers like this. It doesn't really work out too often. Like it's hard to think of an example of a team that, brought in an outside free agent receiver, paid him a bunch of money, and it worked out. It's usually either a trade or it's an in-house guy that you paid, or you pay, a little bit of a lower price to bring somebody in. And Pat, that's a perfect transition here. A team that did pay a lower price for a pretty good receiver is the Kansas City Chiefs signing Hollywood Brown. 1-year deal worth up to $11 million. It's essentially a prove-it deal for Hollywood Brown. And look, it's as good of a bet of a prove-it deal as you're really going to get. Hollywood Brown's
it's a no-brainer from his perspective.
He's going to play with Patrick Mahomes. And yes, obviously Rashee Rice is going to be a factor, and Travis Kelce is still going to be their true top receiver. But Hollywood Brown's going to a place where there's plenty of opportunity. He's playing with the best quarterback in football, and he could finally maybe show what he can really do and then, enter the market again next year, get paid by either the Chiefs or somebody else. I think it's a smart move for him, but it's an even smarter move for Kansas City because I think this could have been a lot worse for the rest of the league. I think the Chiefs could have gone and gotten a big name like Mike Evans, and we'd all be sitting here like, oh, fuck, like now they got a real guy. They went a tier lower, but they also paid a tier lower, which I think is the important part. So look, they've got a guy who can catch the ball. He's proven to be at least an above-average receiver, and I don't think we're going to have these mid-season receiver question marks with the Chiefs like we did this past year. Obviously, they ultimately went on to win the Super Bowl anyway.
So who cares?
But now they've got a starting pair of receivers that they don't have to worry about from a production standpoint or from a just catching easy passes standpoint. I think it's
Hollywood and Rashee Rice were also on the graphic of wide receiver duos, and that made me even more sick. Then
I don't Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas on there too.
I gotta remember I see so many tweets and then just don't and be like, oh, that'll be interesting to say on the podcast, and then I just don't bookmark it. So then I just have a vague recollection. but this was based on what was happening around them. It was one of the better moves they could have made. And like you said, he is established. He is a little inconsistent, but playing with fucking Patrick Mahomes. I mean, obviously he played with Lamar Jackson, who is no slouch at all, but you're playing with, a guy that we've already ordained a top 3 quarterback all time. So that'll surely help him, and it's obviously a massive upgrade over guys like MVS and Mecole Hardman and whatever's left of Kadarius Toney. And I think it takes some pressure off of Travis Kelce as well, who we've mentioned is getting up there in age. And just a really solid move for the Chiefs. I was worried. I kind of thought it was going to be more like another good segue, but I figured like they were going to get someone like Curtis Samuel. Another one of these kind of gadgety guys. But I guess, that's a great way to say that Curtis Samuel signed a 3-year, $24 million deal with the Bills. And I don't hate it at all. I don't hate it at all.
I don't either.
I think they're better suited for a guy like Curtis Samuel as their wide receiver too than Gabe Davis. We saw Curtis Samuel get abused basically in Washington as this kind of running back wide receiver hybrid. He can run end arounds. He can take carries out of the backfield. He's got good speed. That's the kind of guy that Buffalo seems to always want. They try to make Marquise Goodwin happen years ago. They've tried to make, all these guys happen. That it's just not always going to happen.
Hardy, Isaiah McKenzie.
Yeah, McKenzie was the one I was thinking of. Thank you, but Curtis Samuel is an established veteran. He may not be one of the best receivers in the league, but I think he's going to fit into that offense really well, and I think he's going to kind of be one of those guys that. Maybe a fringe owned guy on a weekly basis. But I definitely think he's going to be squarely on the fantasy radar.
It's going to be super interesting because he's another guy. Well, I don't want to disrespect Lamar Jackson like this, but he's another guy like Hollywood Brown where this is going to be the best quarterback he's played with. At least the best. With Hollywood, it's at least the best probably overall. I'm not going to, you know what? I'm overthinking it. Patrick Mahomes is better than Lamar Jackson. I just didn't want to anger all the Lamar stands out there. Hollywood's going to be playing with his best quarterback ever, and Curtis Samuel's going to be playing with his best quarterback ever by a much wider margin. He spent 4 years on the Panthers and then 3 years on the Washington whatevers that they've gone through for the past 3 years in terms of names. He's finally got a real quarterback and one that's going to sling it quite a bit. Yeah, I think it's going to be... I think Curtis Samuel will be probably a flex-worthy play most weeks. I mean, we know what he is, I think. Regardless of quarterback, he's going to be a guy that shows up some weeks, doesn't other weeks, and is going to be on the injury report, plenty. But it's still a guy that is I'm going to be excited about, and I think might be a late enough pick that he's going to be worth it. I'll be very curious to see where Curtis Samuel's value settles in terms of ADP when we get a little closer. Sorry for that noise. If anybody heard that, it was an ad playing. Because I think there's a good chance to get some real value here. And
Jack Link's beef jerky.
No. Do you know how old Curtis Samuel is, Pat? Give me a guess.
28.
He's going to be 28 when the season starts.
He's only 27 right now.
Yeah, I was a little surprised.
My first thought was like 32, but then I'm like, I figured you were asking me the question because, oh my God, someone took Wyatt Langford. Damn it! When you asked me, and I'm like, he's younger than I think he is, so that's why I jumped down to 28. I am so mad. Oh my God.
Pat is just struggling here with simultaneous podcasting and fantasy baseballing. In my head, I was like, Curtis Samuel's at least 29. If it gunned to my head, I probably would have said he'll be 30 when the season starts. Yeah, he's only going to just turn 28 when the season starts. He's still 27 right now. There's a chance that we have not yet seen, the best of Curtis Samuel either. And I think we could be looking at, career highs for him in this offense if he gets the role that he's currently slated to have, especially if Stephon Diggs continues to be a dramatic bitch, because I don't know what Stephon Diggs' future is in Buffalo either. This dude's tweeting up a storm, just shit that
the enemy holds the knife or whatever the fuck that means.
Yeah, I know what you're referencing, and it's not even that. He's tweeting like the most just attention-seeking shit. Like,
he's first team all attention seeker.
He is really on his Aaron Rodgers stuff right now, and I'm just like, just stop. You weren't even good this year. Like, just give it a rest. He
wasn't.
Either play football or don't. Request a trade or don't. Stop being weird. Curtis Samuel has a good opportunity in Buffalo. We'll leave it at that for now. We'll see who they end up drafting. Maybe they draft a receiver and it pushes him down. But for now, I am excited about his potential. Pat, we go to some kind of lower end signings here now. Potentially certainly less fantasy impactful signings. AJ Dillon re-signs with the Packers. I wasn't really expecting this after his kind of lack of production in Green Bay, especially this past year. I figured they would move on. They chose not to. Dillon is returning on a very team-friendly contract, and he will back up new starter Josh Jacobs. So I think it's good for Josh Jacobs. Much like Pat, it's going to be good for Zamir White that Alexander Mattison signed with the Raiders. It's always a good thing when a running back who you're interested in fantasy or who just has intrinsic fantasy value based on their situation. It's a good thing when those teams sign backups that just aren't very good.
Oh, they'll draft someone too. Don't worry. They're going to fuck us.
For sure. But still, for now, it looks good. Like teams are always going to have depth charts. They're always going to have more than one running back. But if that, second or third string running back is just bad, that is a very good thing for the starter that you are investing in. And that is now the case for both Zamir White and Josh Jacobs. Pat, I'd love to hear how you feel.
I'm not worried about either of my boys here. Honestly, more so even Jacobs, just because. Am I going to get castrated for saying he's better than Aaron Jones? I don't think that's that. I don't think that's controversial at all. But because Aaron Jones couldn't stay on the field, which gave AJ Dillon these opportunities that he squandered time and time again, which is probably why they went out and brought in a guy like Jacobs who can take 20 carries a week. And I don't think AJ Dillon's going to stop him. Will it vulture a couple touchdowns? Maybe, but Jacobs is solid in short yardage situations too. I mean, I just think Dillon is squarely the backup. And in Las Vegas, if they give Alexander Mattison the ball, then I'm just going to be really mad. Because, I saw a thing where it was like, oh no, how is Zamir White going to have 16 carries for 64 yards and a touchdown now? And it's like, that's not that bad. That's 4 yards a carry. That was his stat line every game he played last year, but that's not bad.
No, it's not.
That's solid. And we saw him do well with the volume. And I still think the correct move here is to have Zamir White be that number one guy. But I don't trust anything this team does. And I'm still in the Josh McDaniels headspace. I've got to move out of that headspace. But it's Luke Getsy now. He's a bozo. So what?
Very respected around the league, though, Pat. Very respected.
Yes, replaced by Tufts alum, what the fuck's his name? Shane Waldron.
Shane Waldron.
In Chicago. But yeah, I'm not that worried. Zamir White's season is still on for me, unless they draft someone and break my heart. But expect.
Yeah, it is. It's a good thing for Zamir White. Good thing for Josh Jacobs. Pat, one other roster move that I guess is kind of worth noting: Michael Gallup released by the Cowboys.
It is not worth noting.
With a post first designation. Look, I was a big Michael Gallup guy at one point, and then
everyone was.
He just kind of continuously did not deliver on any sort of expectations. I mean, I guess I'm interested where he ends up. Regardless where he goes, he'll be free in fantasy drafts, I would think. But if you can't produce in Dallas when he's had multiple opportunities to do so, maybe, not as much this past year with obviously CeeDee Lamb is the one and Brandon Cooks is there. But he's had his opportunities in the past where that job has opened up and he has never really capitalized, be it just production or health or both. Yeah, it just was kind of sad a little bit. I was like, man, they finally gave up on him just like the rest of us did.
They should have 2 years ago. When was the last time that there's been a guy that so many people have tried to make happen, even after it was clear that it was not happening? These last couple of years, the fact that he was even being discussed was kind of wild. Yeah. Rest in peace, sweet Prince. It never really worked out for you there, and I think free is too expensive for him in upcoming fantasy drafts.
Leave him on the wire, says Pat. I can't say I disagree too much. All right, Pat, we'll move on to some other trades here, and there's really only one way I can describe these trades. They were gross. Couple of trades to touch on. First of all, the Falcons, upon signing Kirk Cousins, have traded Desmond Ridder for Rondale Moore.
Ew.
Man.
Get ready for that.
Okay. Desmond Ridder is now going to go be the backup in Arizona to Kyler Murray, which skill set wise makes a lot of sense. I am very excited to hopefully never hear about Desmond Ridder ever again because Kyler, I'm begging you, please stay healthy. I don't want to run the Desmond Ridder thing back in any situation on any team, no matter what it is. He is hot garbage. And then Rondale Moore, Pat, I didn't even realize this. I don't know why in my head the Falcons had other receivers. I guess maybe I thought they were going to keep Mac Hollins or just I didn't think about it. But Rondale Moore is slated to be a starter right now in 3 wide receiver sets. I mean,
we've seen him be really productive in the slot when given good opportunities in Arizona. Another guy that people have been wanting to make work ever since he got drafted there.
Yeah.
And maybe this could be his opportunity despite, the three young guys on that offense as well as Darnell Mooney. It's not out of the realm of possibility that he makes an impact fantasy-wise.
No, it's not, because, I mean, I think it's going to be either him or Darnell Mooney that is fantasy relevant. I mean, you look at Kirk's history, it might be up and down, but Kirk has always been able to he's always been able to make 2 receivers work in addition to a good tight end. So, if we can assume that Drake London and Kyle Pitts are both going to be solid in fantasy, which, I mean, God, that feels insane to assume that about Kyle Pitts right now. But if we assume those 2 things, that still leaves a spot for some receiver, and that's either going to be Darnell Mooney or Rondale Moore, 2 guys that, different skill sets, but 2 guys that we've kind of been hoping for more from on their teams, but their teams have just not really been the right situations for them. So I think, if I had to make a bet, it would certainly be Darnell Mooney. It just feels like these gadget guys like Rondale Moore, just even when they do flash at times, they refuse to stay consistent. I mean, we could look back at the Dexter McClusters of the world, Pat, and how often were they ever worth owning for more than a week at a time? They kind of always just you sort your fantasy football free agents by most recent points scored, and they'll always be at the top, every other week. But then as soon as you pick them up, they just do fucking nothing. Feels like Rondale Moore might do that, but hey, we can at least keep hopes high because he's got on paper a pretty high role with them right now, unless they trade for somebody else, sign somebody else, or draft somebody else. But for right now, penciled in.
Yeah, and Ridder now begins his journey as a very long time backup quarterback, which is where he belongs. And I mean, can he do this for a decade? Sure. I think he could be one of the. I think he could be Blaine Gabbert or Chad Henne in 10 years from now. But yeah, I was a little higher on him than you going into last year, but blame Arthur Smith, blame whoever, he was not up to snuff.
Yeah, and I think the Ridder, being a career backup, it's also part of a larger discussion of because of his draft capital, he is highly unlikely to ever get a starting look again, unless he falls into one and then produces. Then maybe he'll get one with another team. But it's like you look at a guy like Sam Darnold, like the only reason he's getting another starting gig is because he is a former early first round pick, which is crazy that kind of clout follows you forever, but it does. And Desmond Ridder being a third rounder.
For too long.
Yeah, Desmond Ridder being a third rounder is probably not going to get that chance unless he's able to kind of have a showcase at some point, be it due to injury or whatever. Another gross trade here. The Seahawks trade for Sam Howell, which makes it even more clear, if it wasn't already, that the Commanders are going to be drafting a quarterback with the number 2 pick. Duh. The trade is Washington sends Howell a 4th-round pick and a 6th-round pick. Seattle sends a 3rd-round pick and a 5th-round pick. So essentially, Seattle moved down about 30 spots in 2 different portions of the draft to get Sam Howell. I don't get it. I don't understand what benefit this gives them. It's Adam Schefter reported that it's going to be a competition now between Howell and Geno Smith, which, given Geno's sort of regression last year, doesn't shock me, but I'm surprised.
Low floor.
I'm surprised that they felt it was worth it to give up draft capital to get Sam Howell when now all you really have in your room is 2 kind of mid quarterbacks. I don't know. Maybe they think this will spark something in one or both of them to be competing with each other. Because Geno had the job to himself last year after competing with Locke for it the year prior, and then Howell essentially. I feel like Howell's kind of always been trying to prove himself, and it hasn't turned into much. So I don't know what the thinking is here. It struck me as a weird move for the Seahawks to give up really anything to get Sam Howell. I don't know what the play is, but.
Yeah, I think Smith has at least done enough to kind of hang on to that. Mm-hmm. But I guess you could have kind of picked up a backup, I guess, anywhere really along the way. So to give up draft capital for Sam Howell, and the thing that puzzles me, I guess it's about in general. So since when does a young quarterback like this get benched and then has to be immediately traded? Because we've now seen this 3 times now from this same draft class of 3 guys who range from terrible to maybe they're okay. And I guess that moves on to Kenny Pickett, who is staying in the state of Pennsylvania. He goes from the Steelers to the Eagles for, a 6th-round pick, I believe. Pitt sent Pickett in a 4th, and Philadelphia sent a 3rd and 2 7ths in 2025. Kenny Pickett requested a trade when Russ got there. What the hell have you done to warrant that kind of demand to say trade me? Oh, okay, splendid, with pleasure. Just so wild that this guy couldn't handle being a backup in Pittsburgh, but will now go be a backup somewhere else in a worse situation where he was least likely to play. We talked about Russ and the possibility that Russ doesn't pan out at the beginning of this. Kenny Pickett would have been sitting pretty for that, for at least a possible opportunity to show that he might still have something in the tank, but he has nothing in the tank. I think Kenny Pickett is the worst. I'd rather have Desmond Ridder than Kenny Pickett, to be completely honest. We have yet to see really anything from Kenny Pickett. I do think Sam Howell still has a chance. I think Sam Howell does have a chance whenever Geno does fall off. I think they could realistically turn to him. But Pickett the dude has been so bad, and now he will go away. And this draft class of quarterbacks, horrendous.
Oh,
Matt Corral's in the UFL. Malik Wills might as well be. Bailey Zappi.
Hey,
just a horrendous. And not that it was highly touted to begin with. There was only one guy. Pickett was the only guy that went in the first. With how highly valued quarterbacks are, for that to happen just goes to show that we should have known that none of these guys were going to work out if they weren't even, we're seeing fucking guys trip over themselves for J.J. McCarthy to possibly trade up to 4 to get him. If these guys weren't worth a first-round pick, we should have known they weren't worth a damn.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't know where the Kenny Pickett ego comes from, and Yeah, all we can
That
really
fake
say about
slide that one time.
all we can really say about that quarterback class is I think it's really an exclamation point or a cherry on top of that quarterback class that Mr. Irrelevant turned out to be far and away the best player from it, Brock Purdy.
If Brock Purdy was not drafted in this class, what a disaster.
Oh my God.
What a disaster.
Oh my God. Like it is fascinating how bad it was. And yeah, I think it is a good reminder that next time, you see a quarterback, if the first quarterback taken off the board is taken off the board at number 23 overall, just chalk the entire class.
Yeah.
And if you're a team that needs a quarterback and you're contemplating spending a 20-something pick and nobody else has taken one yet, don't do it. There's a reason nobody else has done it. Like you are better off spending that first pick on anything and then go ahead and burn your second rounder if you want to on fucking Matt Corral or Malik Willis. At least you will have taken somebody good with your first pick. But yeah, this draft class just gets worse and worse and worse. Pat, a trade that is actually involves a good player but just hasn't happened. It being heavily rumored here, though, over the past couple weeks, the Jaguars and Brandon Ayuk have mutual interest. Now, per Mia O'Brien, who is a Jags reporter for 1010XL Jack Sports Radio, she says the 49ers wanted the number 17 pick and Zay Jones. The Jags would obviously then have to pay Brandon Ayuk on top of that, and they decided that was too stiff. My camera has died once again and betrayed me. But they
The Pat Show! Starring your host, Pat!
They decided that was too stiff and declined it. Pat, I feel like this is a move that, because it's been just kind of slowly rumbling over time, we could see actually come through eventually. And I would love to see this because I want to see Trevor Lawrence become a guy. And I mean, look, at this point, maybe he needs as much help as he can fucking get.
Yeah.
I don't know why he is not becoming the quarterback that, was promised sort of. But look, if he gets Brandon Ayuk, I think he can get a little closer to that. And it would be, I'm trying to think if this would be a better fit for Brandon Ayuk fantasy wise than the 49ers currently are. Cause I think he's going to get a quarterback that I'm still comfortable saying Trevor Lawrence is better than Brock Purdy.
Agreed. At least he has more potential.
Yeah, and I think he's going to step into a situation with kind of similar competition. I mean, instead of Debo, you've got Christian Kirk, and instead of George Kittle, you've got Evan Ingram. I think this would be an improvement for him. So I would love to see this move get done at some point. I just don't know if I think it's going to happen, but time will tell, I suppose, as I replace my my camera battery and try to get you guys my face back here on the podcast.
No. The Pat Show. All right.
The Pat Show has been just trying to select the most gross baseball players.
That's what it's. I'm on the clock right now.
I can tell.
God, my team is absolute cheeks. I just took Paul Sewald, so that's.
Oh God.
That's where I'm at this point in the draft, dude. My team is cheeks. Oh. Sorry. Are we still even streaming if it's just me? Okay.
Yeah, we are.
If you dropped, would this still even be happening?
Whenever I press start camera, it doesn't. Yeah, no. If I dropped, you would just still be in here alone, I think. But hey, that would be certainly a disaster.
Whoa! You know what? Drop right now. We're gonna test this.
There is one more thing transaction wise that we have to touch, or not even transaction wise, but just relating to moves. The league is investigating tampering accusations on the Saquon Barkley and Kirk Cousins moves. So they are looking at the Eagles and the Falcons. This is just kind of funny to me because
they're going to get tampering.
Tampering happens all the time. You just can't be obvious about it. And these two teams, I guess, were very obvious about it. And now they might get docked. And here's the thing, Pat, this could be a pretty hefty punishment because if you'll recall, the Dolphins got docked a first-round pick just for tampering with a guy they didn't even get. It was Tom Brady and Sean Payton, and didn't get either of those guys, obviously. And hello, here I am. I'm back on the screen. And yeah, I don't know that it honestly matters, the fact that they got them or not in terms of a punishment, but it certainly looks worse optically. And the NFL may crack down here, and it could be bad because these teams are trying to compete, or at least, they're both trying to compete right now.
Yeah, and Cousins was the one who blew it by saying that he had spoken to their trainer. Brother.
Yeah.
And what Saquon's like, one of his friends said something.
No, I didn't see exactly, but I believe it was I think it was James Franklin from Penn State had said something to somebody. And so he had known about it. Saquon's old coach.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So like this could be dicey. I don't
Finally
know
just had a hot pick in this draft now. I took Jackson Merrill.
Hey, I picked him up in my
Who will likely break
league.
camp. Well, he will break camp as the Padres center fielder. So.
I saw that center field. I love that because he's already a shortstop, and now he get that center field.
That's what I'm saying. He's got that shortstop.
wonderful.
He's my starting shortstop.
I hope you guys are enjoying the sprinkle of just random baseball talk here. Yeah, Pat, I don't know how this will work because the Dolphins, the first round pick that they got taken away was like in the late 20s. The Falcons are sitting here with, I think, the number 8 pick. So like that's going to be.
Would that happen this year though? Or
I don't know how quickly
you would think that would be next
goes.
year. You would think they
Probably
would be able to expedite that process that quickly. You never know with the NFL.
I mean, hey, Roger Goodell suspended Tom Brady for not even actually deflating football, so who the fuck knows at this point? Pat, real quick, we can touch on the biggest free agency winners and losers here. I think the winners are pretty obvious right now. You've got the Falcons, who are winners, if for no other reason than just signing Kirk Cousins that we just talked about. Like this was the move that took them from team that's going to be competitive to team that could win the Super Bowl. Like, I mean, it would still be a pretty bold call if you were to head into next season and say, I got the Falcons winning the Super Bowl, especially with a guy like Kirk who has not actually been that close to doing that before. But they filled the biggest gap on their team. They've got more receivers now. They've got a entire new, coaching staff to try and make the most of this. The Falcons certainly hit a home run with Kirk Cousins because there was really just no other big name or big time quarterback that they even had a chance of going after. Like Kirk is a better target than Justin Fields was, and those are really the only guys they had potentially at their disposal. So I definitely have the Falcons as winners. Then we've got the Houston Texans just kind of rebuilding that defense, essentially swapping Jonathan Grenard for Daniil Hunter and also bringing in Danico Autry. So they are acquiring more sacks than they gave up. Obviously Grenard and Hunter both near the top of the league in that category last year, but once you add in Danico Autry on top of it, you've got a pretty dangerous defense before the Texans even hit the draft to address some more of those weaknesses. And then they got Joe Mixon too. And I think that is a solid running back upgrade. I mean, it's not, I think Mixon, as he gets a little older, I think he's like only 26, but as he gets a little more tread on the tires, may not be a huge upgrade over Devin Singletary, but I think he is an upgrade, and especially if they follow through on what they said they're going to do and bring in another running back to keep him fresh, I think it's going to be an improved run game overall over what we saw last year with the kind of failed year 2 of Dameon Pierce, and then let's just lean on Devin Singletary for the rest of the season.
I will say, that is certainly another upgrade. I'm not huge on Joe Mixon as a real life player, but we've seen him do it. We've seen him do it time and time again in a really good offense, but this is a really good offense. Somehow we're talking about the Texans. So I think he'll kind of slide into a similar opportunity. So
Joe Mixon has been very lucky and very good at just existing on good offenses, and that leads to fantasy production and real life production. When you have a team that's constantly near the goal line, that's going to be good for your numbers. And then one more winner from this free agency so far, I think you got to go with the Green Bay Packers. Some may look at going from Aaron Jones to Josh Jacobs as a lateral move or just not really think too much about it. I look at it and I see Josh Jacobs is 3 years younger than Aaron Jones. He's probably going to play more games than Aaron Jones. And then they also added Xavier McKinney in the secondary. So I think this is certainly a good offseason for the Packers as they try to take hold of the NFC North, which I don't believe is impossible, even with a very, very good Lions team and a up-and-coming Bears team that's probably about to be on their heels as well. Vikings, we can address later. They need to find a fucking quarterback first.
I think the Xavier McKinney signing is being very overlooked behind their other moves, but that's a really great one. We talked about Josh Jacobs, get some cap space away by getting rid of Aaron Jones. David Bakhtiari gets mercy killed finally. We saw a lot of really good things from this offense at the end of the year, especially the offense. And they got Keyshawn Nix back, who is probably the best return man in the league right now. He had like 3 touchdowns last year, but a lot of things to be looking forward to if you're a Packers fan. And now, the negative guy, to talk about some of the negatives.
We've assigned Pat to talk about the losers.
There were 4 teams in particular that are the real losers, and the one that we alluded to a little earlier was the Los Angeles Chargers. Under Jim Harbaugh, we have seen them just dismantle basically what was left of that offense. You know, Mike Williams gone, trade Keenan Allen for seemingly something they could have gotten more for, let Gerald Everett go. Austin, I almost forgot friend of the podcast, Austin Eckler. Oh,
Don't
no.
you dare.
Oh, no. He's coming after
Don't
me
you
again.
dare.
He's coming after. What am I going to? I'm going to have to call him touchdown dependent again. Like, oh, God, he's coming for me. I'm actually a little scared. But yeah, to replace them with I love Gus Edwards, but to replace them with Gus Edwards, no wide receivers? Question mark. I don't think they.
Nope.
They brought in Hayden Hurst and Will Dissly. Granted,
I didn't even see the Hurst move.
They did tear down some cap space to kind of work things around, but like they still have a defense with a lot of guys who get hurt a lot. I think that we all kind of just assumed Jim Harbaugh would jump in and they would kind of get right back on track. But I think we're looking at a rebuilding team this year.
Yeah.
Which is really surprising with Justin Herbert's potential. Which, again, I say it every time we mention him. We still haven't seen it. Like, it may not be his fault, but we have still yet to see Justin Herbert be this borderline elite quarterback consistently that he's being touted as. And it may not be this year again, because, like, at 5, they're going to get a great weapon. I assume Malik Neighbors will probably be the pick.
I would think
at 5.
Yeah.
We talked about Joe Alt, whether he would go there at 5, but I think with the way they have dismantled that, the wide receiver room and just kind of the skill position room in general, they have to go wide receiver here. But just a very tear it all down kind of thing here.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, like, Herbert's a guy that we're going to, I think, continue wanting more from, at least from a production standpoint, for a while probably, because they are not building a team from a philosophy or roster standpoint that says we want to throw the ball, even though they have a quarterback that we're all pretty sure is more adept to throw the ball than maybe 30 of the other 32 quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah,
like, this
I'd
is
say
guy,
about 20, at least 25. Yeah,
I would certainly say 25.
Yeah.
Like, this is it's tough for us Herbert hopefuls out here, but I think it's a sad reminder that Jimbo is putting together a team that he wants to win real games and not maybe be flashy for fantasy, which is unfortunate for us.
And in a similar vein is kind of the Bills. Just basically having to let go a lot of guys. Watch Jordan Poyer go to Miami of all places. I'm blanking now. Bills offseason. They dropped like 3 guys the same day. Well, they got Mitch Trubisky.
They got rid of Tre'Davious White, who has been off.
Yes, visiting the Raiders.
Well. Still a free agent, but yeah, the Bills were very cap restrained, and they got
to bring in like Curtis Samuel. And, like, if Curtis Samuel is kind of your most noteworthy move right now. Right. But, again, I feel like they were in a position where, like, they're still going to be okay. Like, I'm not super concerned about the Bills. I still think they'll compete for the AFC East with the Dolphins and with, presumably, the Jets if they can get back on track with Aaron Rodgers.
Hey, what about the Patriots, huh?
Yeah, so the next team here, these 2 teams I kind of have it chalked up to because they did absolutely nothing. And I was kind of thinking about it the other day talking to someone. I just said, what the hell are the Broncos doing? Like, the Broncos have done absolutely nothing, which, again, makes it clear that they're probably in J.J. McCarthy mode. They want J.J. McCarthy. But now we see the Vikings, like, that's no guarantee. The fact that they're currently rolling with Jarrett Stidham, and then in their wide receiver room, little Jordan Humphrey? Is Tim Patrick still there?
Tim Patrick signed a new deal this
Tim
offseason.
Patrick,
he is back.
What's that rookie's name who stunk? Marvin Mims. Is KJ Hamler still there?
I don't think so.
Like,
KJ Hamler's in the gulag, I think.
Cortland Sutton's hurt, right? I'm not making that up.
I mean, if he is, he's going to be healthy by the season. I'm pretty sure.
So I'm discounting Cortland Sutton. I don't know why I thought he had an injury that
they almost got rid of him too. I mean, that was.
And then to trade Jerry Jeudy, first of all, Browns. What the? Did you see that extension?
Yeah, we should have probably talked about that on its own. Honestly, great move by the Broncos to get rid of him just because they didn't have to fucking pay that. God.
Well,
3
hopefully
years,
they
58.
wouldn't have. Hopefully they wouldn't
Right.
have. That's insane for a guy that has done nothing, effectively.
Yeah.
Be a top 15 pick and has not done much. But yeah, the Broncos, it's just like, it seems like they're sitting around waiting to do something, but it's like, what the hell are you going to do? Even if you get J.J. McCarthy, even if you get your guy, you're still not building the greatest roster around him to succeed. And in a similar vein, in an offseason where we've seen guys flying everywhere, and the Cowboys haven't done a damn thing. You know, you lose Tony Pollard, you lose. I understand Tyron Smith, you know, very oft injured, but you know, to lose him, to lose. Oh God, I'm gonna botch this pronunciation. Biadasz, the center.
Tyler Biadasz.
I was close.
How it is.
I don't know, but I'm sure
pretty
we're
sure.
close.
Pretty sure.
But to lose him too, it's like, is Deuce Vaughn and Malik Davis like gonna? This was a team.
Dowdle.
This was a team that was really good last year.
Yeah.
And I mean, they still have CeeDee Lamb. They still have Brandon Cooks, I guess. They still have Tyler Ferguson. They still have Dak Prescott. But just to see so many big running backs on the market, you know, whether Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley or our friend Austin Eckler, to just kind of sit back and do absolutely nothing while the league around you is doing everything. Just very un-Cowboy-esque, too. You know, Jerry Jones loves, and especially Mike, I said someone's seat was on fire last week. Mike McCarthy is in flames. Like, Mike McCarthy, like, lit a match and dumped kerosene on himself. Like, that man is on the hot seat. You'd think they would kind of be a little bit more, oh, God, lost my train of thought. A little bit more urgent. But yeah, really bizarre to watch these teams just kind of sit back while so much happens.
I bet you they draft Jonathan Brooks. I think that's where this is
I
heading.
can see it. They should get him for a bargain.
Yeah, I could imagine him being a second rounder there to Dallas or maybe a late first. Who knows if he could slide into there. But yeah, I agree with all your free agency losers. A lot of teams being oddly complacent. Pat, I think this week we're going to once again skip our viewer questions, folks. We love you. There's a reason I didn't ask for questions this week because I still had them banked from last week. Every question I got last week was... Every question I got last week is essentially evergreen, and we will get to them eventually. I have them all written down here. But, Pat, for this week, I want to talk about the NCAA tournament and some of our picks and thoughts as we head into, you know, really the best weekend of the year in sports.
Thursday, Friday, man. Let's go.
It's incredible. So, look, overall, we talked about how the East region is absolutely loaded. I'll start with this. And, I mean, look, certainly this will come back to bite me because this is what just the internet does. But I do think UConn will repeat. If I have to pick a champion, it is going to be the University of Connecticut. Pat, for anybody that researches for their bracket and looks into all the metrics of, you know, how do you find a national champion? They have to be this on KenPom, and they can't have done this or had this type of coach or all. You look at really any singular metric, UConn qualifies in all of them. Every single one. And UConn is one of only 3 teams that I've seen qualify in basically every single one of those metrics. And it's UConn, Houston, and Purdue. Houston, I think, has a chance. Purdue, until they get anywhere close to the national championship game, I cannot pick them. And I imagine eventually that will bite me. Like, it bit me in the past. I used to feel the same way about Virginia. I used to feel the same way about Villanova. They both won titles eventually within the last few years. But for now, I just think that choking bug is something that's going to come up. Like, whether they can mentally push past it this year, we'll see. But teams are going to test them. And if teams start testing them, if they run into, you know, Utah State in the second round or Gonzaga in the Sweet 16, and one of those teams goes up on them, are they going to start thinking, oh no, it's happening again, and then unravel? Like it is a mental thing they have to get over. So I am picking UConn to win. And as far as the rest of my bracket, I mean, it's certainly far from finalized, but I have some teams I really like here, Pat, including, but not limited to, Drake, Grand Canyon, and New Mexico. I think those are some of my favorite teams. And I also, in the first round, have Samford over Kansas. I think that's probably one of my bigger upsets. But Samford, man, they play a chaotic form of basketball. They are one of the fastest paced teams in the league, and they rip threes at you like nobody's business. I feel like they are a fun, prototypical March team to pick. Pat, I know you have not filled out a bracket just yet, but do you have any initial thoughts here as we head into the first the weekend?
I'm in on Drake just as you are, and I believe many people are. I'm very in on the Mountain West. As I said at the beginning, I think just very disrespected. I've got Utah State taking down Purdue in that round of 32.
I do too.
I've got winning their game. What, Texas they have, I believe?
Nevada has Dayton in the first round.
Dayton, others 10-7. Because the other 10-7 could very well be, it should be Colorado State, who, if Colorado State beats Virginia, I am picking Colorado State to beat Texas. A playing team seemingly wins every year. I think that exact streak has been broken.
It broke last year, but other than that, it had been continuing for a long time, yes. Then
there's a lot of picks where I'm just like so on the fence about, where like I really want to do it, like James Madison over Wisconsin. McNeese is kind of a big popular pick over Gonzaga, and it's like, this is a different Gonzaga team, and like they are beatable, but they've been playing really good basketball since January. So
I also think there's something to be said about a Gonzaga team that's not a tippy-top seed and maybe doesn't have that pressure that they normally have. Like, they're such an experienced team. They've got an experienced coach, and now if they can head into a tournament with less pressure finally, like, nobody's really talking about Gonzaga. And if they are, they're talking about McNeese beating Gonzaga. So I think that's going to play into their favor for sure.
And another one, I believe, same region, same area is where was it? No, but McNeese, I don't think I'm going to be able to do McNeese there. One that I think I'm gonna do, though, I read something about how if you are a very fast-paced team against a very slow-paced team, the slow-paced team tends to win those games.
Yeah.
And there were a few examples. And I've got to make UConn's road a little easier. So give me the Yale Bulldogs to knock off Auburn in the first round there, which is probably my boldest pick, which will probably be incorrect. But, and especially considering I'm also thinking about going UAB. Just because no matter what, I've got UConn knocking down either Auburn or San Diego State. So you might as well have a little fun with it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do both, because it's hard to have a double-digiter in your Sweet 16. But I do have UConn winning as well. They have just shown, they've really only had 2 duds this year at Creighton and against Seton Hall. Very uncharacteristic. Then they had a close loss at Kansas, who does not lose at home.
Yeah. Hardest place to play in the country other than maybe Cameron Indoor.
I'd agree. Another team, speaking of the Big East, I love Creighton. I've got Creighton in the Final Four. I've got Creighton coming out of that region down there.
You want to know a fun fact about Creighton that I found out today? So in watching UConn versus Creighton games, one thing that announcers harped on a lot is that Creighton fouls the least in the country. Least fouling team in the country.
And they've got a 3-time Big East depoy.
Yes, but the fouling thing is more of a connection to what I found today, which is Creighton forces the least amount of turnovers in the country. 362nd, Pat, out of 362 teams, which combine that with the fact that they don't foul, they just play soft defense. They don't try that hard. They don't play physical defense is what I'm getting at. Mm-hmm. I mean, their defense metrics like KenPom they're pretty good still, which tells me they're able to, stay with their man, whatever, but they do not play physical defense. And I feel like anytime you're last in the country in any sort of important metric, which to me, turnovers forced is a relatively important metric come March, I can't pick you to go that far. I don't have them out super early. I have them out to Tennessee in the Sweet 16, but I thought that was funny because I was originally considering them potentially for a Final Four run, looking at the other, ways that they qualified for some of those national champion blueprints. But that one alone just kind of, I was like, I can't do it.
You're greatly underestimating Rick Barnes in March here. How terrible.
I know.
How terrible of a coach he is when the calendar turns. They talk about how Tom Izzo is such a great coach in March. First of all, I have them losing as well, because why are they even here? Why are you even here? But yeah, I think that if I've got Purdue going down and I don't believe in Tennessee, I mean, I've got a Creighton Gonzaga Elite Eight coming out of that region when Gonzaga is one of the most popular upset picks. So I could be really hurting. I could be hurting bad come the end of the weekend.
I think that region is probably the toughest one to pick, the Midwest. Well, actually, no, the West is just as tough. But the Midwest is one where, like, Pat, you mentioned Rick Barnes not being good in March. It's like, that's true, but look at the other teams in that region. Every single team in that region hasn't done it before except for Gonzaga. And Gonzaga, like you said, has one of the tougher first-round draws you can have. Like, to me, that region came down to I'm either going to pick Gonzaga or Tennessee, and I said, screw it. I'm going to hope that Tennessee, just the fact that I think they have the most talented roster in that region, I'm just going to let it ride because quite frankly, I don't feel good about any of those teams in that region. That's why I said UConn's region is filled with all the Final Four teams I would love to have if they were dispersed differently. And look, as far as your Yale over Auburn pick, Pat, I love it. I want the state of Connecticut to support each other. Mm-hmm. I want Yale to do the job because Auburn, especially after watching them in their conference tournament, look, I mean, it's another team that's really never done it before. They've never gone super far in the tourney before. They scare me. They're a very good team. The one upside, whether we face them or not, we being UConn, is UConn's essentially playing home games for the first 4 games of this tournament. We're playing in Brooklyn and then Boston. So the UConn faithful are going to be there certainly much more than the Auburn faithful or the faithful of any team we run into. There's really no other team from the Northeast other than Yale that we're potentially going to run into here. So the home court advantages with UConn, which is why I went with them despite such a tough road. And yeah, my upset picks, Pat, I mean, I went through most of them, but I also, you're going to disagree with this one. For now, I have Michigan State over North Carolina. Michigan State, Ken Palm statistics.
That would piss. That's what would happen, though. The team that everyone's mad about, they always seem to win a game or two. I wouldn't put it past it.
Ken Palm statistics have Michigan State as the unluckiest of, I believe it's either every team in the field or every one of like the remotely notable teams in the field. And I just think it's more for me about North Carolina being a little bit fraudulent to me than it is about Michigan State being anything great. And so just kind of trying to pick and choose, find these little upsets in there. But Pat, I'll reveal my current Final Four to you. I'm sure you haven't settled on one yet, but I want to hear your reaction to it. And this is subject to change, but the craziest pick in here is the one I'm kind of the most set on other than UConn. So UConn.
Who's at Alabama?
No. UConn, Houston, Tennessee, and New Mexico.
Jesus,
we're riding with the New Mexico Lobos to the Final Four. Look, 5-11 seeds have made the Final Four in the past. We had one in 2021 with UCLA. We had one with VCU a couple years ago. Well, I guess like 10 plus years ago at this point, but there have been 5 in history, most of them being in the last 15 years or so. And I think it's time for another one. I think that region is ripe for it. And New Mexico is sneaky high up in all of these KenPom metrics too, Pat. I believe they're 41st in adjusted offense and like 27th in adjusted defense. They are almost on the cusp of being like a national championship qualifier by that at least.
It's just insane that, again, to just shit on the committee a little more, this was a team that would not have made the field had they not won the Mountain West title. And they're favored. They're favored against Clemson, who are probably the most overseeded team. Like, I think by the numbers, I think that's going to be the most popular upset pick by,
definitely.
3 or more, degrees as they call it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just again, I definitely haven't beaten Clemson, and I might have them beaten Baylor. But yeah, that could end up being a bit of a wild one because a lot of people like Charleston, like you said, you like Grand Canyon, even Nevada, the 10 seed, in North Carolina is really beatable. I would call it that. Like they're by far. Yeah. I mean, granted, they're the 4th number 1 seed, so obviously they're going to be the least scary, but I don't see them making a run at it.
Yeah, I still might. Well, so I have Michigan State over North Carolina, and then I also have Michigan State in my Sweet 16, where they then lose to in my Elite 8, where they then lose to New Mexico. I may still put Grand Canyon over Michigan State and just have a hilarious
my
West
God.
region. Because like the rest of my Final Four, I was going through the first 2 rounds of this bracket, and I was like, I have a chaotic ass bracket. And then as I went further in and picked my Final Four teams, it got a little more chalky and kind of leveled out. Like UConn, Houston, Tennessee are not bold picks by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
So I'm like, look, if I'm going to have one thing to set me apart, if I'm going to have one other team that I can follow religiously, hopefully through the whole tournament, but at least for the first couple games, give me New Mexico. Let's send it. And maybe give me Grand Canyon as well.
I think I'll go for my Final Four right now. I think I'll go UConn, Houston, Creighton, Alabama.
Okay, so that's a 1, a
1, 3,
a 3, and a 4.
So nothing
Fair
crazy, but not straight chalk.
I mean,
I do think there's going to be a bit of discourse in that Purdue and North Carolina regions.
Yeah, I mean, there can really be no Final Four is wrong. I mean, last year was one of the more chaotic years. The seeds were, 5, 5, 4, and 9, I believe, between UConn, Miami, San Diego State, and FAU. So anything can happen. It's March, and I think especially this season has proved to be extremely, extremely volatile and chaotic because every top seed in their conference tournament lost except for UConn, I believe. Everyone else, every other conference tournament, power conference tournament, was won by not the top team in that conference. Unless, Auburn won theirs. Tennessee was the top seed. Purdue didn't win the Big Ten tournament. I mean,
Houston didn't win the Big 12.
Right, exactly. So, it just goes to show really anybody can lose on any given night, which means, of course, this will be the year that we get all 1 seeds in the Final Four. But have fun with putting together your brackets, guys. And again, don't forget to
your
join our bracket
nitroglycerin
pool.
pills.
I will link our bracket pool once again on probably my Instagram story, maybe tomorrow morning. Just be on the lookout for that and get in there. Top 3 finishers, we will have a little prize for each of you guys. So get in there. And Pat, we got anything to say before we hit the end stream button here? The big red one staring me in the face.
I just selected Junior Caminero. This is also a keeper league, I should mention. So I've selected Junior Caminero. We'll leave the folks with that.
I wish I had the Stephen A sound. We don't care. All right, folks. For Pat Gustafson, I am Brandon Carney. We'll see you guys next week.